So as part of our plan for getting to Glen Helen, making sure that when I get there I can actually do the 24 hours as I intended, I decided to go down and do a 12-hour endurance race in Colorado Springs down at Ram Raceway. And I entered the Ironman class. That's 12 hours running solo nonstop. And when we got there, I was nervous. I've never done anything like this before. I've raced enduros. You can see here, you can see this footage of me putting on the numbers, and they look all nice, and I'm looking like confident. Those are the wrong numbers. I don't know if they sent my dad's numbers in my packet or if I nervously took them from his packet, but those aren't the right numbers I'm putting on there. I had to peel those back off and put the correct ones on there. All right, here we are. It's 8:45, night before the race, and having never done a 12-hour or really riding that much motocross, it's kind of weird. I've got more jitters and nerves for this race than I have in I don't even know how long. Almost feels like it did before I did my first race ever. At the starting line, I finally got to see about how many people really were in my class. And the pre-registration showed about 15. Having never done anything like this before, I was hoping I would finish maybe mid-pack. But when I looked down the line, there were way more than 15 there. And come to find out, there were 23 people that had entered in the Ironman class. I don't know if it was I got something on my GoPro protective case or just the angle of the sun, but the footage here of the course from the early race is really hazy. But I came out the gate. I didn't really get that good of a start. I started picking my way through the people earlier on, and I was pushing too hard. I could definitely feel my heart rate getting up there, and I was riding with my heart rate monitor in my ear, and for the first 2 hours I was running at about 190 beats per minute. I definitely was pushing too hard, and part of that is I don't ride motocross at all. I never really have. I've always been a trail rider, an off-road guy, and a huge portion of this race was motocross, and so I was not really fully in my comfort zone. But I mean, it was a lot of fun, but I wasn't hitting the jumps, and with being out there to race 12 hours, I wasn't necessarily too worried about not hitting them. It was pretty warm when we started the race.
What's that filter, Emma? You getting enough water?
I am now, since we increased the amount of water in the bladders. It's so stinking hot out here. The sun just so intense. Through the meat of the day, it was about 96 degrees outside, and that sun would just sap all the energy out of you. I was ripping through my water so much faster than I had originally planned. I kind of figured my water consumption based off most of what I burned through in a normal enduro, and I ended up having to increase the number of pits that I was doing, and I had to fill the bladders with more water than I originally planned on, just so I could try to keep up with how fast I was sweating it off. And you really couldn't handle being out there without taking pits more frequently, because that sun was just you could feel your insides cooking. There was one cloud that came, I think we had one cloud during the peak of the day for hours, and I've never been so grateful for a single cloud in the sky. After we got past that and the clouds came in from the afternoon a little bit and the heat mild off, I felt like a whole new rider again and was going pretty good again. Felt like I could pick up my pace a little bit. When we started hitting hour 9 and 10, that's when I really started to really find out where I've got things that I need to change in my plan, in my training, and some stuff that I never expected. I was getting hot spots in my boots. I've never gotten blisters from my boots, and I've ridden, I've done as much as 8 hours before in the boots, but I found that right at that 9 and 10 hours in that heat with that much sweating, that I was getting some raw spots. I ended up with some nasty blisters on my ankles, and my hands in the last quarter of the day, they were getting so ragged that I was having to ice them down when I come into pit because they were swollen and on fire. But pushed through, made it to the end of the day. When I came in for my last pit of the day, based on the lap times I was doing, I knew I was going to be able to do 2 laps, and if they were fast enough, I might be able to squeeze in a third. I went out there. My first lap out was, it was okay. I mean, it's your perspective of what fast is at 12 hours is totally different than when you're racing a 3-hour event. This is, the equivalent both in mileage and time of racing 3 enduros back to back. But the last couple laps, I wasn't pushing as hard as probably I should have. I had more energy. I could have pushed more, but I think part of me was just mentally tired. My hands were just shredded, and I wasn't sure if the blisters around my feet had ruptured or not. Then I finished that second lap, and based on the time on the clock, it would have been extremely questionable whether or not I could have fit another lap in.
Well done.
As I said, we're done. We're filming you. We're done.
193.6 miles. Kind of disappointed I didn't break 200. All day long, I never had any idea where I was in perspective to placement. I was just riding my own race and wasn't really focused on placement. My focus was to finish, to find out what in my pit plan worked and what didn't, to find out what fitness weaknesses I had and where I needed to change my training, because this whole thing is kind of the practice run to the actual Glen Helen race. Next morning I woke up, my hands were pretty much the same as the night before. I mean, not as raw, but not a lot of strength. We walked over to the table where they had the results, and I was kind of hoping that I would finish maybe mid-pack is kind of what I was aiming for. So I started at the bottom of the Ironman class sheet and started looking my way up from the bottom, and started on the second page, looked up through it, didn't see my name in there. And then I got up about halfway through the first page and didn't see my name either, and I was beginning to wonder if maybe I wasn't on the sheet, because it hadn't really, if there was a scoring error, because it hadn't entered my mind that I would have finished better than mid-pack. And come to find out, I actually finished second in the Ironman class. And the difference between second and third was really close. We both did the exact same number of laps. I just finished my last lap a little bit sooner than Graydon from Slavens Racing. Congrats to him. He was definitely putting down some really fast laps. I think on the whole his laps were faster than mine. I think I beat him in the pits more than anything else. I got to tip my hat to Carl Brown, the winner of the Ironman class. He beat me in third place by a 6-lap margin. So tip my hat to Carl Brown. He really was riding extremely well out there. And honestly, any of the guys that finished the Ironman, that was brutal. The heat just beat you up. So I tip my hat to anybody that went for it, and congrats to everybody. So next time on Couch to Glen Helen, we'll be doing the night racing, or the night practices. I was going to do it before this video, but I just hadn't gotten around to editing it. So we'll see you guys for the night riding video.